G'day there guys, it's your Aussie Hubby Markee, back at it again with another AssholeTax video. Now with that said, I want you to sit back, relax, chuck a prawn on the barbie, and get ready for some bloody good content. Now, our first post is by user Abe Froman King Sauce, titled, Celebrity Chef Ain't Good Enough for Pizza Man. I've always wanted to own my own place, so I could charge jerks, but that may be why I don't own my own place. But this story involves the owner. I worked at a celebrity chef nearly fine dining restaurant on the Las Vegas Strip. We make gourmet food that doesn't always sit well with the proletariat. One night, we were graced by the presence of the famous celebrity chef himself. He mostly did meet and greets, and all the scary chefs went wobbly in the knees when he asked to see what they were cooking. We had a customer complaint come in during this time, and he decided to fix it himself. We sold pizza, but it was gourmet pizza, not Domino's. The complaint was a common one, that our pizza wasn't like they were used to. I knew there was no way to please these low-rent customers, and was interested to see how an elite chef handled them. Long story short, he remade them 2 pizzas by hand. They had no clue who he was and didn't care they could be starring on TV for all they knew. The guy simply complained the pizza wasn't good enough. He wanted a Chicago thin crust pizza, just like national chain makes. We simply couldn't do it made to order. You can't just make the pizza dough and oven for thin crust magically change from your standard pizza. The guy turned down the first pizza and the 2 celebrity pizzas. He would have had his meal comped with free dessert if he wasn't such an ass. The celebrity owner basically told him he doesn't know crap for cannolis and he can go to Papa John's for his crap pizza, and kicked his ass out. He then turned to all of us watching employees and said, I own the place. I can do that. Don't you ever bloody do that. What national chain does Chicago thin crust? No idea. He was just asking for a particular style of pizza that we couldn't do, and sent 3 pizzas back for not being the specialty that he wanted. It happened all the time. If you're not used to gourmet pizza, you might think it's bunk. This was 20 years ago. Maybe he wanted stuffed crust from Little Caesars or wherever. Whenever I think of gourmet pizza, I think about thin crust like Neapolitan-style thin crust, where it's almost cracker thin and crispy crunchy. On the other extreme of that, I know a girl actually from Italy that makes homemade pizza that she calls pillow pizza because the crust is thick and chewy, like biting into a pillow. Chicago does have its own style of thin crust, but all the chains within it are local. I don't know of any national chains that have Chicago thin crust. Fun fact, Little Caesars is Detroit-style pizza. I know too much about pizza. Was the celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay? Actually, it was DR, David Robbins, who runs Wolfgang Puck's 5 Vegas restaurants. No idea why I'm still scared to say his name. For some reason, Wolfgang sounds like a name of a 90s gang that would slick their hair back. It does sound scary to say, lol. Also, who complains about pizza? That crap's my favorite. Our next post is by user Lyndon the Wog 97, titled, Stuck Up Millionaire Who Owes That Whole Town Money Gets What's Coming. Let me start this post by saying that this story doesn't involve me in any way. It's about the guy who used to own my parents' property. Let's call him Greg. All you need to know about Greg is that he is a stuck-up millionaire who thinks he's so perfect and spiritual, but never pays anyone, whether he gets a loan from the bank, a friend, or someone did work for him. Like, seriously, I could write so many stories about this guy on Reddit from what people have told me, so please let me know if you would like more about him. Anyway, on to the revenge. One of the people Greg owed money to was an earth-moving company. 6 months went by and he didn't pay them, so they drove a truck full of dirt and gravel to his house and dumped it onto his driveway, so that no one could get in or out of it. They then proceeded to call the other earth-moving companies in the area, telling them not to go over there, so that the only way anyone could get in or out was if he paid them. And of course, they made him pay everything he owed them before they moved it. Our next post is by user Elephant, titled, It Only Takes One to Tax the Many. I think this sub is the closest for this story. We are a restaurant that had pivoted during this crisis to provide takeout meals. Mostly pasta meals that come in a tin to heat up at home. We basically portion out the meals into the tins, but if there is extra at the end of packaging, we will put the overage into one meal. sort of an end of the batch bonus for random people. At least until someone ordered 2 of the same item and got 1 regular and 1 larger portion. Instead of contacting the restaurants, where we could have explained that their good fortune of getting the bonus package, the customers decided to post on social media that the portions are inconsistent, along with a picture. Please keep in mind that 250 gram weight is labelled on the package, so it's easy to see that 1 was more than it should have been. Anyways, now that the management has seen the post, we are directed to toss out any food that is not full portion size. It's the end of the bonus because of someone who didn't realize the tin was half full, not half empty. That's some pessimism humor for ya. I still distribute the extra at the end, I just distribute it more evenly, despite the fact that I'm breaking protocol. I hate it when people avoid direct confrontation and go all passive-aggressive online to get sympathy likes. Right? If someone says they don't like something, I try my best to fix the situation while I can in the moment. But I swear, people won't give you the chance to fix it because they'd rather play the helpless victim on Yelp. There's a reason that site is named after the sound a hurt puppy makes. Why not politely respond on social media, explaining their good fortune? I think this would be well received by the general public and help to dispel notions of poor quality control. By the way, I completely agree with you about not wasting food. It's a lesson I've been hitting hard with our kids. Do not waste food. Particularly now, with all the difficulties involved in getting food on the table, and all the workers who are risking their health, safety, and life. Corporate, baby, where the human touch withers into dust. What human? I lost my way in office once and accidentally wandered into the floor labelled Higher Management. I was super confused, because all I saw were server racks, and then I realized, AI has been here for a while now. We're just too placated to realize it. Why toss it? If you can't sell it as a portion and are not supposed to give it to a paying customer, why don't you put it on the side for an employee to take home or give it to a homeless shelter/food pantry? I still spread it around. I can't throw away good food any time, but especially now. But that's corporate life. An unhappy guest is a public concern. Keeping everything consistent and not making waves while not mentioning waste is business done behind closed doors. And not just this one place. Our next post is by Indian Joe, titled, How My Boss Saved Big on Printing Supplies. Some time ago, I worked in a small print shop doing big-sized digital prints. Way too long intro. I spent almost 3 months there. To give you an idea of the general atmosphere, there were 7 people working there when I started. All of them have been there since at least 5 years. By the end, 4 of them had quit. The boss tried to get new people to work here, so during these 3 months, I met 4 new hires. 3 of them had quit within 10 days. I was supposed to do 39 hours per week, but never went under 40 and routinely did 45, the maximum legally allowed here. My boss complained about that, telling me that I had better get better at my job and that I was costing her money fixing my daily mistakes in evening overtime. It was actually her official motive for giving me my 2 weeks' notice. The actual motive was that the day before, I left to go home 30 minutes after closure time. The only reason I was late this day is because she was berating me about the excessive overtime I did. I crap you not. She was blaming me for the facts I proved wrong, machine log in hand, and when she refused to accept the proof, I just said, if you don't want to listen to anything, it's useless to try to talk with you. And since I'm exhausted, I'm going to sleep. See you tomorrow in the morning. The next day at 9 AM, she gave me my 2 weeks, and during this 2 weeks, she had me do overtime every day, including this same very day, by giving me extra urgent work to be done by 8 AM the day after, less than 10 minutes before closing time. One of the machines was a 3x2 meter. You can read those measurements. It was a flatbed printer, used to print flat sheets of PVC, dye-bond, aluminium, or anything flat, stiff, and under 10 centimeters, 4 inches thick. These were supplied in 3x2 meter sheets, but were often cut to size with our digital flatbed cutter. Since it can cut any shape, we often cut lettering or logos, and leftover material had fairly irregular shapes. One of our boss's policies was to never thrash any printing material because we can reuse them and save money and the planet. As a result, there were layers of mixed materials stacked on every wall. Last-minute jobs being our specialty, nobody ever had time to sort them out. The actual story. We got a job to do on 3mm thick PVC. It would have required 2.5 sheets. We only had 3 in stock, but the boss wanted to keep 2 for a later job. We could have had extra supplies delivered the next day, soon enough for this later job to be done in time. Instead, the boss ordered me to gather all the 3mm PVC that I could find to see how much we could save. I spent 2 hours rummaging around the shop, measuring and sorting every PVC leftover that I found. I then spent 2 more hours to see how the files to print could fit in all those wacky pieces. But in the end, my boss was happy. We could do the first job with only 1 sheet and the scraps. The morning after, I started printing. It was 55 signs, printed both sides. Since I have to use several leftovers, all of different sizes, the file prep is not as straightforward as usual. I had to manually prep 18 files to print on 9 sheets, instead of just using an automated nesting tool. With a flatbed printer, double-sided is not automatic. You have to be meticulous while preparing the files and while aligning the sheets on the machine. If everything goes well, it can be done in 4 hours. Everything did not go well. When I started using the leftovers, some were too dirty to be cleaned and some looked okay on one side but were scratched on the other. As a result, I had to discard some sheets, but keep them stored anyway because save the planet, and redo some files, taking longer than anticipated. Worse, some were so old they had weirdly off-gassed. This is invisible to the naked eye, but once printed, it would interfere with curing the inks, producing random speckles instead of solid color. Even more time wasted since I had to redo the files for another leftover sheet and reprint. Last but not least, some were from a previous supplier, and while being the right thickness, required different settings with the cutting machine. Of course, you could not tell them apart from each other. This one's had to be redone, reprinted, and recut. I spent only 8 hours this day printing this job, only because it had to be delivered the next day. My boss reluctantly accepted to let me do the last prints on a new sheet and order some more for the second job because it is the only way she could ensure that we would have it done in time. In the end, we used 2 sheets and some scrap, and it took me a total of 12 hours. The PVC sheets cost around €12 per square meter, so around €72 per sheet. My time cost my boss around €50 per hour. In total, it cost my boss around €744 to have this job done. Why is it an AssholeTax? If I had done it efficiently, using the sheets in the stock directly, I would have used 2.5 sheets, and with new sheets, I would have avoided a lot of problems. And I would have had way less work to do on prepping the files and setting up the machine. I could have been done in 3 hours for a total cost of €414. Not counting my co-worker time on the cutting machine, nor the extra ink, even more expensive than the one for your inkjet printer, my boss cost herself €330, and screwed up her margin since the signs were for a friend and she accepted a lower price. Step over dollars, which is your pay, to pick up pennies, the cost of the material. How much per hour does he cheat you on pay that he can afford to waste time? She always accepted jobs knowing we barely had enough time. Here she accepted 2 jobs knowing she had not enough supplies. She combined a piss-poor organizational sense with a micromanaging personality. I don't think it ever dawned on her that more last-minute jobs did not mean more money when it makes overtime skyrocket. Our next post is by Markee, titled, "You want to trespass on my property and call the sheriff on me for target shooting? Prepare for a hefty jerk tax." I own some rural undeveloped acreage that we plan to build on someday. In the meantime, we would camp or drive out and spend the day target shooting. The property is well posted with no trespassing and no hunting signs. The main access is gated with an 8-foot metal gate. There are berms, ditches, jersey barriers, and logs at any point along the 10-mile stretch of road, along where anyone would even consider accessing the property. The neighboring properties have all done the same, so basically there is no easy access on a 30-mile length, and even with all that, people still cut the logs, move the barriers, fill in the ditches to access the property on their quads and dirt bikes. Last weekend, a couple of friends and I decided to go out there and do some short-range target shooting, maybe 25 yards. We are maybe 2 miles into the woods, and suddenly a guy and his 8-year-old come up behind us on dirt bikes, and the dude goes off, yelling at us about shooting and endangering his young child. Remember, we are shooting short-range targets we have set up against a hillside, so no errant bullets whizzing around, and it's my property that is posted. I try to explain he is actually trespassing when he says, "Champ, shut up and let the men handle this." My male friend says it's her property, you need to talk to her. So once again I try to explain to him that he is trespassing. He tells me to frick off and says he's calling the sheriff because we are shooting and we need to stop what we are doing and follow him out to the road to meet the sheriff, because the property is gated. No shit, jerk, I gated it. I said we would not leave, but go ahead and call. So he walked away and called. While he did that, I also called and told the sheriff's department the gate was unlocked and they could drive in, or if they wanted to call me when they get close. They said it would be about an hour and they would come to the site. Now, we had probably a dozen rounds already loaded in 3 handguns, so we figured what the hell. Told the dad we were going to target shoot, and of course he flipped his and called the sheriff again. We'd fired them, and then made sure all the guns that were on the table opened so the sheriff could see that they were empty, and sat there talking amongst ourselves, while that jerk stood with his son. Sheriff shows up, and the guy explains how he and his son ride there all the time. Describes how he cut some logs and used a small Kubota to make an entrance so they could get in. Shows what direction he came from when he rode up, and discovered those dangerous shooters. The officer just lets him talk and writes it all down. Then he comes over to us and I show him my ID and my phone, where I have pulled up the tax records to show I am the owner and this fine gentleman does not have permission to be on the property. The officer goes back over to the man and gets some information for his report, asks if those are the dirt bikes that they were riding, and the guy proudly says yes. Then the officer asks where the helmets are. Guy says he doesn't need them on private property. Officer asks if the guy's bike registrations are current. Again, guy says they don't need to be on private property. So the owner asks who owns the property, and that's when the guy realizes things are not going his way. So far, his AssholeTax has cost him a ticket for no helmet, and a double amount ticket for the kid not wearing one. 2 tickets for unregistered bikes. 2 trespassing charges, a vandalism charge for the work that he bragged about to access the property, and he had to push both the bikes 2 miles out to the road, and then walk another 3 miles to his truck. Plus, whatever the cost is to repair the damage he did, making the access and damages for the trail system that he created. If he hadn't have been a jerk, and I would have just told him he couldn't ride there and blocked his access. As for our illegal shooting, the sheriff complimented me on my grouping, which was nice, lol. This was beautiful. My justice boners are at full mast. Always glad to know I have given a random internet stranger a boner. You're a good man, fella. I like the cut of your jib. How dumb do you have to be to not understand that you can't assert private property rights when you're trespassing? He did a lot of work to trespass, so it didn't slip his mind. Also, the sheriff complimented me on my grouping, which was nice. Sheriff sounds cool, he had to enjoy levying this jerk tax. Sheriff just glad he didn't have to do dead trespasser paperwork. Not just paperwork, he'd need to call the coroner and there'd be at least a couple reports asking questions. What a wonderful example that man is setting for his son. I'm glad you and the officer showed his son how to be an adult. Thank you for helping the next generation. You may want to consider speaking to a lawyer about suing this guy for the cost of the trees that he cut down. Tree law is a big deal, and the cost of those trees could be far, far bigger than you might expect. The r/legal advice subreddit is full of posts about people whose trees were cut down, and some of the judgments are higher than the cost of my home. It sounds like you'd have a slam dunk case against this guy based on what he told the sheriff. Already on it. Called my attorney, and I'm actually meeting a guy from a company that does environmental impact studies out there next week to walk the trails that come from the entrance that he made. He was pretty smart about it because you can't really see his handiwork from the road, and he would park on the other side where it's not posted, so people would think he was riding there. We are going to ask for restitution and/or file a civil suit against him. Mama don't play around. And our last post for the day is by WhoIam69, titled, "A customer gets a $500 tax on an $8 meal." Just found this sub, and now I have the place to share one of my favorite stories. I work at a famous chicken chain that is known for our politeness. At my store, we offer free meals to police officers in uniform who eat in the restaurant. My coworker greeted this customer and asked for his order. He promptly showed what an arse he was by berating her for having to wait in line for all of 2 minutes. He did it so loudly that 3 officers eating lunch heard him. He used very foul language and took 4 minutes to do so before placing his order. Strike 1 for him. He then showed his next move by camping out in a booth and making a mess that I only expect from large families with multiple small children. This included throwing his trash on the floor in plain view of the officers. Strike 2. He then went to his car and started throwing what seemed like an ocean of old fast food wrappers and cigarette butts out of his car into the parking lot. This was strike 3 for him, as this was littering. All 3 officers went out and made him clean up his mess and wrote him a ticket. Where I live, littering carries a $500 fine, and if he contested it, the judge could tack up to 60 hours of community service. So, this guy ended up paying $508 for his lunch. This man deserves some community service. I'm thinking maybe a week or so cleaning toilets at Chick-fil-A? Chicken place? Nah, just as a former employee of said polite chicken restaurant, their toilets are decently clean. Make 'em clean at taco time or Chuck E. Cheese. This is why I make my kid help me clean up every bit of mess he makes in restaurants. He can't help making messes, he's 5 and utensils are tricky with small hands and poor coordination, but he can be aware of his impact on the world and help make it better. I agree, I show my kids how to clean up and I explain it. I do most of it as the little ones are little, but it's important to teach them. As they get older, it self-incentivizes them to not make a mess. Alright, well that's today's AssholeTax for ya. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you thought of it down in the comments below. I might make one more in the next week if we get enough likes on this one. Let's say if we can get 600 likes, I'll do another AssholeTax in the next few days. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Tell me what you thought of it down in the comments below. I'd love to know what you have to say, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye guys!